Good morning, and thank you so much for coming out today despite all the storms that we had last night. You all made it, and so happy to see you all today. I want to thank Blunt Partnership for allowing me back time and time again, well, third time and not really that many times, but appreciate the opportunity to come back again and for you all to take time out of your Wednesday morning. I know you all are very busy this time of year, and so I appreciate you all taking the time to have an engaging conversation about employee engagement. And as Greg talked about earlier, I mean, just the statistics that we see, we're going to be reviewing some of those, but I want you to be able to take away things and implement those today. So really appreciate your time today. Just a little bit about myself. I know Greg did a brief introduction, a little bit about me. As Greg mentioned, I'm an HR business partner at RSI. We're in Oak Ridge. We are part of government contracting, and so we do job cleanup sites for the government. So anytime you have a site that the government has used for whatever purpose, whether it's mining, years ago the Manhattan Project, so any of these sort of government sites, we go in and do demolition and cleanup for that. So I'm an HR business partner at RSI. I'm a Knoxville native. I am from East Tennessee. I grew up specifically in Seymour, Tennessee, halfway between Knoxville and Sevierville. Currently my husband and I live in Powell, so not too far from here in North Knoxville. Some of the fun things we like to do, we do a lot of drone photography around East Tennessee. My husband is from Dunlap, Tennessee, and so we go to Sequatchie Valley a lot and do drone photography there, along with traveling to various different places, camping and hiking. So that's a little bit about me. That's not why you came here today. So we're going to go over the learning objectives today. So I have 3 learning objectives, and I'm sure that you all, when you all were reading through the description and decided to sign up today, you all are looking for some sort of objectives to take back to your workplace. The first one that I want you to have for today in terms of our learning objectives is today business leaders, that's you all, will define employee engagement and understanding the causes of burnout. We're going to go through the various aspects of burnout, the causes of burnout, and what you can do as a business leader to help mitigate that risk for burnout. Another objective that we have is that business leaders will learn practical ways to expedite engagement with minimal investments of money. This was something I really wanted to hone in on because the resources and the assessments and the different tools and takeaway, I don't want you to spend a lot of money on, especially with inflation. Especially, I know companies are a lot of times strapped for money if you work a nonprofit, even more so. And so I want to give you practical tools that don't require a huge investment. And then finally, business leaders will learn how to focus on winning the interaction process, which we're going to talk a lot about, refocusing our work based on strengths, and then improving efficiency for the work. Any questions about objectives and where we're going? All right, so where we are going in terms of kind of an agenda. So today we're going to be discussing what is employee engagement. Hopefully you all have heard about employee engagement, so this is not going to be any real sticker shocker to you. More importantly, we're going to talk about why we need employee engagement. I'm going to give you some statistics about how this hits the bottom line in terms of earnings per share, in terms of your top performer. And so employee engagement is more than just a soft and warm, fuzzy feeling that we get a lot at times, but actually how you can take this as a business case to your business leaders and your top senior leadership if you need to change a way that you do things. And so bringing this back to the financial impact of the business is a critical part for how we will be discussing today. We're also going to talk about some components of burnout. As business leaders, you have the best indicator from your employees. You are the frontline supervisors when someone's burned out, and I want to give you the tools for how you can help identify those as well. We're also going to be talking about your role in creating an engaging environment and focusing on the areas that you can control. You may not be able to control personal life or home life of your employees, but there's a lot of things you do have the ability to control as a business leader and as a frontline manager. We're also going to end with some tools and takeaways for how you can go back to your workplaces today and start making progress on the things that we talked about. And so those are the top things that we're going to be talking about. And then, because we're talking about engagement, we're going to be doing an activity as a group. So just keep that in mind as well. You will need a partner that you do not know, and that will be our ending activity for the day. And then we will conclude with a recap about what we learned today. let me add a disclaimer about what we are not doing, because I think a lot of times employee engagement is so open-minded, right? You probably signed up for this and you're going, I'm not really sure what we're going to talk about. Not really sure, what can I take away? So with those things in mind about where we are going, let me talk about what we're not going to do. We're not creating programs. I think businesses have programs and there's a time and place for that, such as a wellness program, such as a program for employee incentives, and I think those are all great. However, that's not sometimes exactly what your culture needs. Sometimes it requires a lot of money. Sometimes it requires a lot of buy-in from your senior leadership. Sometimes it relies a lot of maintenance to maintain and keep continuing to bring that up over and over again. Most programs have a shelf life of about 6 months before they kind of die by the wayside, or you have to keep ordering more stuff. And so we're not going to talk about programs today. We're also not talking about swag. I don't know about you, but I have never stayed or left a job due to swag. And you probably have a junk drawer full of swag from your company or prior companies. What we're also not going to talk about today is a Google Office. I think a lot of times employee engagement, we say, oh, we need ping pong tables and we need nap pods. I'm here to talk to business leaders that don't work in Google. How many of y'all work at Google? Not anyone, right? And so we're not going to be talking about resources and making things very different than what their current state is. We're looking to improve just a little bit over time. So we're not going to be talking about a Google Office. Finally, we're not going to talk about surveys. I like surveys. I'm sure you all have conducted surveys in your current roles as well. But surveys have to have a lot of planning and a lot of good execution, and you have to have the feedback and the follow through and then deliver that to the employees, saying, hey, I know you took the survey during Christmas, here's what we learned. Unless you have a person that completely manages that process, sometimes surveys are not as effective as we always think they are. So I wanted to give that disclaimer about where we're going and actually what we're not doing. Any questions, thoughts? Yes?
I'm glad you mentioned surveys, because when you're talking about engagement, it's a bit circular. If the employee's not engaged, you're not going to get good survey results.
Exactly. And the people that usually fill out surveys either are very happy or not very happy. You don't get a lot of people in the middle. So great feedback as well. And this is a engaging presentation, so if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand or stop me. If I don't know the answer, there's plenty of knowledge here in the room that we can find a solution together as well. All right, so what we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about what employee engagement is. So the definition that we're going to be using today is the combination of ability, motivation, and opportunity. It's a pretty simple definition, but that's the one that we're going to use today. So some other examples for employee engagement that we've seen with Quantum Workplace, we have employee engagement is the strength of the mental and emotional connection employees feel to their workplace. We also have Gallup, who said engaged employees are the ones who are involved in, enthusiastic about, and committed to their work and their workplace. And Willis Towers Watson tells us that engagement is the employee's willingness and ability to contribute to the company's success. So those are some other working definitions to help us define what employee engagement is as well. So why do we need employee engagement? We've talked about the definition. Yes?
I don't know how interrupted you want to be. I can stop.
No, go ahead.
I don't like those definitions.
You don't?
Because it's all about being engaged with the work or the company. It's a truism in the military that people don't fight for the country. They fight for the person next to them. Employees are engaged with each other, not the work of the company.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about that with the interaction process with the managers and the employees and their peers as well. But great point as well. Those are some definitions that I wanted to share with you all today. So there's going to be more than one definition for employee engagement. So I wanted to give you 4 just to start out with. So why do we need employee engagement? Why does it matter? Your top performers are twice as engaged. Hopefully it's not a shocker to anyone, but I just wanted to communicate that to you. Your engaged employees are more productive, have lower turnover, and greater return to shareholders. 26% of those, or the top engagement, 26% have higher employee productivity, have lower turnover risk, and are more likely to attract talent. Those are the ones that have the engaged workforce. But we also have the companies of highly engaged employees are 13% greater on their total returns to shareholders in the last 5 years. And then engaged workers miss 20% fewer days of work, and 3/4 of them exceed or far exceeded expectations in their prior performance review. So these are your statistics that provide the reasons for why we need employee engagement. Companies with engaged workforce demonstrate a 19% higher operating income overall, and then 28% higher earnings per share than the average employee. So those engaged workforce have an actual bottom line impact to their financial records as well. So now that we've talked about what employee engagement is and why it's important, we're going to talk about what is job burnout. I'm sure everybody here has heard of job burnout. Anybody want to throw that out there, what they think job burnout is? If not, we'll go through the definition. All right, so job burnout is a type of stress related to work. It includes being worn out physically or emotionally from work. Job burnout also involves feeling useless, powerless, or empty. So there's a couple components that actually contribute to this. The first one is exhaustion. And this is the central symptom of burnout. So this means that it's physical, cognitive, emotional fatigue that undermines people's ability to effectively and feel positive about what they're doing. The other type of job burnout is cynicism, also called depersonalization and representing an erosion of engagement. It's essentially a way to distract yourself psychologically from your work. Anyone know why someone would be cynical at work, or why someone would want to completely depersonalize themselves from work? Any thoughts on that?
Defense mechanism.
Absolutely, defense. What else? Why do you think that they could cognitively not want to be engaged? Or an erosion over time. Maybe at one point they were engaged and now they aren't. Easier to leave. Could be a mistrust in your management. It could be the ability that they think something unethical is going on. May not be. But if at one point they were engaged and all of a sudden they just feel like there's an erosion of engagement. I'm just here to come in, clock out. I'm not really engaged in the work that I do. It could be something psychologically they don't want to trust work, or they want to be distracted from it. So that could also be a reason as well. And then finally, we have inefficiency. So this refers to the feeling of incompetence and the lack of achieving results or productivity. I don't know about you, but I like to feel complete, at least at the end of the day, if not the end of the week. And I don't like having 25 things that I can't finish up on. And so that's something too, when you think about job burnout, you can be engaged in the work that you do, but if you never have a sense of completion or a sense of closure on things, that can also lead to job burnout as well. Other reasons that can cause burnout: lack of control. This is going to be a central theme for our discussion today, is a lack of control from the employee's ability, and then also you as a frontline supervisor and a manager facilitating more control back to the employee. So lack of control, so not having a say-so for how you do your job, such as your schedule, assignments, or workload, can also lead to burnout. Or you don't feel like you have the resources to do your job as well. We're going to talk about some resource allocation a little bit later today. But think about if you couldn't do your job. Maybe it's a software program that you have. Maybe you don't have a point of contact for a certain area that you are supposed to be responsible for. That can feel very frustrating and very inefficient. And you just feel like you're kind of spinning your wheels to be able to do that. Another cause is a lack of clarity for what's expected of you. We all have job descriptions, but I don't know about you, but my job description is not really what it was when I first got hired. And so sometimes we have to realign our expectations, whether it's with a new team member, whether it's our boss, whether it's a new direct report. We all have to provide that clarity that is outside of the job description. What is it that I need from you specifically? What's the result I'm actually looking for? What's the deliverable that I'm needing from you to be able to present later? So think about that as you are supervising your team members. Do they have a clear expectation from you of what you are needing? And then finally, we have conflicts with others. Maybe you have an office bully. Maybe you feel like your coworkers are against you or your boss is too involved. So these sort of interpersonal relationships can also contribute to your job burnout as well. Other things, too much or too little to do. Maybe your job's boring, maybe it's too busy. I always say when I have 25 things to do or 25 priorities, that's not priorities, that's just a to-do list. And so having an alignment conversation with your employees or even your direct supervisor saying, what is it that you want me to do? I've got too much to do and I'm trying to find some prioritization of that. Or too little to do. If you only have 1 or 2 things to do in 8 hours, you're trying to stretch those out a little bit more. And that can be exhausting, trying to find the energy to keep working on things to just barely fill your time. Also, lack of support can also be a type of burnout as well. When you don't feel like you are supported by your boss, supported by your peers, supported by people in your personal life, you can also bring that stress into the workplace as well. Also, problems with work-life integration as well can also contribute to job burnout. So maybe, it takes more time and your work takes more time, maybe your family takes more time and it's coming into your family. Maybe you have an aging parent and you're having to manage those expectations during the workplace as well. Maybe work is being brought home to your family life and it's interfering with dinner time and those type things. And so I like having work-life integration instead of balance because our work and our life are not separated things, they are integrated. And so if you don't have sort of the balance within the integration, that can also cause burnout as well. All right, so now we're going to talk about your role as a manager. We've defined what employee engagement is. We've talked about how it relates to the workplace. And then we've also talked about burnout and the causes of burnout. And so now we're going to be talking about your role as a frontline supervisor. All right, so first of all, engagement starts with you. This is a quote from a book that I read. It says, leadership starts with a focus on oneself and building on the character that will lead people to want to follow. That's where we're going to start. It's going to start with you. And you may not have employees that you oversee. You may not feel like you have a lot of influences, but you at least oversee a process that does impact people. Maybe you oversee a certain person that does have effect on people. So you have more influence than I think sometimes we give ourselves credit for. What this presentation will require from you today, and your employees are looking for you to have, it will require a refinement in the interaction process you have with your team and your team members. We're also going to be looking at things that will tap into your current management style. Now, I'm not asking you to define your management style, and maybe you don't know what yours is, but I'm going to challenge you on a couple things for the way that you think about your management style and how it may be impacting your team members in relation to employee engagement. This is also going to require a large use of EQ or emotional intelligence. Hopefully everybody knows what emotional intelligence is. So go ahead and start thinking through that for how you would use that, because we're going to be pretty introspective for how we think about our interactions with our team. And we're also going to be using quite a bit of situational awareness. How many of you all know someone, your coworkers here, we'll say? I think those are your coworkers. So everybody else works for a different company. So how you apply the information is going to be very different for how you apply it at Regions, for how you apply it at your workplace. And so it's all going to be different. And so think about the situational awareness that what may work for one team member may not work with the other. So I want you to be thinking of this because this is going to be kind of deep rooted in the brain for when we go through these things. And think about the way that you may be challenged in your management style and how we can refine those a little bit better. So your role as a leader. Engagement starts with you. You are the environmental engagement cultivator. That's you. What we're going to focus on today is areas that you control. And the first one of those is by building relationships with you and others. We're going to be discussing one-on-ones, and I'm going to give you some strategies for your one-on-ones that you have with your team members individually. We're also going to be talking about some shared goals and initiatives, and I'm going to share with you some shared initiatives of one of our parent company. And then I also want to tell you about the importance of employee resource groups. I'm going to show you a company that I think does employee resource groups very well. Again, not a program because we're not doing programs, but I wanted to shed some light on where those employee groups are and how you can facilitate community within your organization. As we discussed earlier, work-life balance, it's not balance, it's an integration. And so when we think about employee resource groups, we want to give our employees community because they're seeking that. I know a lot of the statistics, the younger generations, the Generation Y and Z, the millennials, and the newer generation, they're looking for relationships at work. More so than maybe you or I would put the emphasis on our church friends, maybe it's our family, and we don't have to have best buddies at work. It's always nice to have a good friend at work, but we don't have to. Your younger generations are seeking more community from work, and they're expecting that from work as well. I also want to challenge you to know what your employees do, not just their job description. What do they do on a day-to-day basis? How often do you talk to them? What are their pain points? What are their challenges? What are their barriers? So we're going to walk through some of those things for how you can be able to identify those easier. The first aspects that I want to talk about is hosting better meetings. I'm sure all of us have been in a meeting and we thought this should have been an email, right? And so I think we've all been like that, especially if we've had back-to-back meetings and we're going, yes, it's useful information, but that didn't require 3 hours of time. And I don't know about you, but anytime that I'm gone, I come back to an avalanche of emails. And especially in our 21st century time, it's infinite, right? If you were going to mail me something, there's a limit on how much my mailbox can physically hold for mail. So I can only get to it when I can. The problem is with email, it just keeps coming. It never stops. And the longer away you are from work, the more things that you have to do when you come back. So I want to talk about the importance of meetings. Every time you are in a meeting, that's an opportunity cost of not doing something else. So when you think about the next time that you want to host a meeting with your team, really think through, is this needed? And most of the time it probably is. But just think about, just kind of do that double check and say, is this worth an hour? How much money is sitting in the room? If I pay you $15 an hour, $20 an hour, $30 an hour, if I have a 1 hour meeting, I have to add up all your time. That's how much money it's costing to host one meeting. So think about when you do host meetings, being more efficient with that time. I want you to define what the goal of the meeting is. You have a goal, but have you articulated that to your employees? Do they know what the goal is? I think a lot of times we just make assumptions. When people make assumptions, they're usually wrong. And so make sure that you have clarified what the goal is. If you're not sure, just ask someone. Hey, we've got this meeting on Thursday. Can you tell me what the goal is? If they don't know, probably nobody else does too. So make sure that you're articulating the actual goal of that so you can either add clarity or you can define next steps to make your time much more valuable when it comes to meetings. There's 3 P's when it comes to leading better meetings: purpose, process, and preparation. So the purpose, like we talked about earlier, do you have a purpose for the meeting, or is it just on the calendar to hold space for some process that is now obsolete? So think about this the next time you're at a meeting. What is the purpose of it? Do your employees know what the purpose is? And is it worth the company's time? What about process? Do you have an agenda? Hopefully you have an agenda. If you don't have the agenda, how do people know what's expected of them? If we have a meeting with these two, do I know that Christine's going to talk? Am I expected to talk? Am I expected to know something? And so sometimes we get this fear, and sometimes how it relates to engagement is the employees don't know or have that clarity about their role within the meeting. So have you defined a process? Who's facilitating? Who's going to be speaking? What are the topics that we need to be prepared for? So talk about that process for the use of time that you have together. And then finally, preparation. Is there something that can make the meetings much more efficient? Can you send a handout ahead of time? If you're going over financials, can you send this out a few days ahead of time so people have time to look at it? Maybe you want them to be prepared with brainstorming ideas, so they need to read information to be able to come up with solutions instead of just on the spot as well. So think through your meetings on how this can be better facilitated. I'm not saying it's inefficient, but a lot of times your engagement, sometimes through meetings, people sit there or they're on their phones, they're not on their camera. So think about ways to actually bring them into the meetings a little bit more. Another aspect I want you to consider as business leaders is your standards for how we conduct ourselves. The first aspect that I want to look at is, do you have a double standard among team members or yourself? So let's say that there's a mistake made by one of your team members. Are you softer on one employee than the other? Do you have the same standard of yourself as well when you make a mistake as well? People can see the double standard. If I'm always really nice to Christine whenever she makes a mistake, but I'm really harsh on you, how does that make you feel about the other person, right? There can be some conflict among coworkers as well, just because there's a perception that the supervisor doesn't treat them equitable.
Maybe you expect more out of me than you do Christine.
Exactly.
Maybe.
Exactly. So think about that as well. And not that you're trying to intentionally create a double standard, but think through some scenarios when there's a mistake made. Is the same mistake, if everybody made that same mistake, is your solution applied consistently to all members of your team? And what about yourself? When you make a mistake, do you own that? Or is it always kind of a blame to other people, or it's never your fault? What is the expectation of being behind on projects or emails? For me, I'm like an email ninja. I can't stand to have too many things unread in my inbox. Not because I want to know all the information, but I know that new information is going to come. And so I like to be ahead on emails. But do I have a different expectation of my team? What if I have someone on my team that's 100 emails behind? Do I give them a day to catch up? Do I expect them to know and read every email? And so think about some of these expectations and the interaction process that you have on that you may have a double standard with people among your team. Do you tolerate inequity in the workload? So what happens when an employee calls in sick or they have an unexpected day off? How is that workload shifted? Do we always give it to the same performer, the steady person that still comes to work? Because they may be burned out doing other people's job as well. And are you redistributing the work back to that person when they come back? So think about how workloads are distributed. What's the timing of that for how you can make that workload more equitable? Online interaction. How many of you all have remote employees, or at least that you work with? Everyone's in office? No remote employees? Well, if you do come across a remote worker, think about the interaction that you have with that team member. Do you expect cameras off or on? In our company, it's required to be on because you cannot hide behind your camera. If I come into the office and I have to still get up, be there on time, why should you be able to not be on camera? I can't turn myself off, so you can't turn yourself off either. So think about what sort of standard do you have with people that you interact with from an online basis. Is there a disparity among those in the office versus at home? Do we expect people at 7:45 in the office versus we can have people come on right online at 8 a.m. online? What about dress? Do we expect people in the office to dress a little bit better, but then we tolerate people that maybe don't dress as much, whether it's in home or in the office? So do we create this same standard across different platforms? So something to consider in your 21st century remote working and as you manage remote workers as well. I want to talk about cleaning up the break room. And I'm not talking about the physical break room with cleaning supplies. I'm talking about the way that we conduct our speech as business leaders and as managers. And so this is going to be similar to, this is not a harassment prevention training, but I wanted to just give you some areas that you may not have focused on as business leaders in the past. So first point I want to make is there a former team member that you bring up in conversations to your current employees? I'm sure we've all worked with really bad team members before. Either they left or we fired them, and they've somehow made a mess with our current data, our current systems. We talk about them. Yeah, so-and-so, they were here a while ago. They messed up all that stuff. What does that do to the engagement level of your current employees? It's not great, right? What about the reverse? What if they were a superstar employee and they left to go work for a competitor? How do we talk about them now? Oh, they're so great. I wish they hadn't left. What does that do to your current workforce? They're there. They come every day. So think about how you bring up other team members within your workplace. Is there a difficult manager that you have to warn your team members about? Maybe you've worked with them in the past. Maybe you've not had a great relationship. And now you're like, oh, I just want to give you this tip, right? Rules of the road. Let me give you this word from the wise. But what sort of perception are you making for that employee to not have their own opinions of that manager as well? They may work well with that manager, and maybe you don't. And so think about your conversations about the people externally from your team and how those play in the interactions with your current team. Jokes or comments. So are your jokes or comments directed differently towards those, or have an unintentional impact? I was born in 1995. I'm 29 years old. I did not grow up with Family Matters or the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Finally got that right. So if you make a reference or a joke about that, I would probably have no idea. And so what that does, that creates kind of this bias towards, I'm going to have a joke and then realize, oh, you're too young or you're too old. And so that may not be my intention, but think about the demographics of the people that you see on your team. Are you making jokes or references that most people may not even get? So think about that in your speech. All right, interaction process with individuals. One-on-one check-in meetings. Who in here has one-on-ones with their team? Good, good. What's your cadence for that? I just want to shout out. Once a month. Good deal. Anybody else? About once a month? Absolutely. If you do not have one-on-ones, I highly recommend one-on-ones. So starting point, you can have two options. You can have it open-ended. So this is how my supervisor and I started out. So it's your time to discuss business, life, personal, etc. And during this maybe 1 hour time frame once a month, you let the employees pick what they want to talk about. Maybe they want to talk about their workload. Maybe they want to talk about their upcoming grandchild arrival. Whatever it is, this is a time to build the relationship with them. This is going to be different than your meetings and creating agendas to generate purpose and deliverables. The goal of one-on-ones is to build relationships, not necessarily to execute any sort of business. So one option is open-ended. No agenda, just our time to grab coffee and build a relationship. If that scares you to death, you can have more structured one-on-ones. And so some ideas that you can implement for one-on-ones would be some highs and lows. Tell me good things about your week, bad things about your week. What are 2 things you're most proud of? Tell me about that project that you were working on that went over really well with our senior leadership. Can you tell me about how you did that and what was your proudest moment for that? What are you looking to improve? How can I support you this week? And so you're asking questions to be able to gather more information, and it's also building the relationship with them as well. So 2 options, open-ended and structured. I will say with my supervisor, I had it more open-ended when I first started. And then as we got more comfortable with each other, the workload increased. I did have to have more structure to that because I needed that time, that one-on-one, to get some things done that I couldn't get done in group conversations. Let your employees start the meeting and determine the frequency. I love the idea of once a month. My boss and I have it every 3 weeks. Not too frequent, but not too infrequent. So I think your employees need to determine that frequency. And again, this is about building the relationship with your employees. So there's no agenda that you're trying to get out of. So think about how often they want to meet. Ask them, how often do you want to meet? And you can always make those adjustments later on if it's too frequent or not frequent enough. Here and here uses OneNote. Anybody like OneNote? I like OneNote. So OneNote, if you don't know, is a Microsoft Office product, and it helps organize a lot of things. So you can use OneNote to type out your conversations with that employee. What I like about OneNote is you can date it and say, hey, 3 weeks ago, I told you about the project. How's that project going? I know you're having some issues with this. How can I help you with that? Oh, I know your grandson was born 3 weeks ago. How's he doing? And so thinking about how you can start doing a follow-up on that instead of just kind of open-ended as well. So I love OneNote. It's my third love, Jesus Family, and then Microsoft Office products. So think about OneNote and utilizing skills for that as well. Quarterly realignment of roles and responsibilities. Let's say that you leave your job or someone on your team leaves their job. You will probably revisit the job description and repost it. Why do we do that? Well, roles and responsibilities may have changed. What was posted at one day is now obsolete. Maybe we don't do that before. Your pace of work may have changed as well. So think about this. what you hired a person into, or maybe your current role, is that changed? Did the workload shift? Do we not do a certain program anymore for whatever reason? And so think about how you can realign quarterly roles and responsibilities. I know you still oversee the 5 projects I told you about. Are those still going well? Do we need to consolidate down to 3? So this is the time to really think about your roles and responsibility for making that workload equitable within your team. And the last 2 I think are so key here. Ask for feedback on recent changes within the organization. Ask your employees this. Hey, I know that we just saw that new financial report and we weren't as high on earnings as what we thought. Wanted to get your feedback on that. What I like about it in the one-on-one conversation is that there is no judgment. They can give you their true opinion. Employees feel most engaged when they know their opinion matters. And they may not be comfortable sharing that with you, or they may have doubts about the company, but if you actually solicit their feedback, that can also help build the relationship with them as well. And this is probably the hardest one. Ask for feedback about how you can improve as a manager. The worst thing that we can have is someone to meet with us to tell us that they're leaving. And we felt like we somehow didn't know that or we didn't catch that. But how many of us have ever left an organization because of a boss? Many of us, right? People don't leave organizations, they leave their boss. And so when we think about this, ask for feedback from your employee. Again, it's just one-on-one, so it's not like this is a big judgment. Ask them for how you can improve as a manager.
Well, they tell me that every week. So.
They tell you that every week?
Every week, yeah.
Are you making improvements?
Trying.
Trying.
Personnel file.
Mm-hmm. I think the key is you have to build a relationship with your direct supervisor so they don't go and leak other information or feel like they have to complain to someone outside of you. I think it's important to build that relationship. So even if it's not as structured, maybe they like coffee. Maybe you want to go out for coffee during the workday just to build that time. And so I think feeling safe in that is to build on things that you already know. Do they like having coffee? Do they like doing something outdoors that you can either do easily during the workday or not? And so feeling safe is based on a relationship. And if you don't have that relationship, they're going to find safety elsewhere. So make sure that you do have some sort of cadence of one-on-one.
What about ground rules? Do you establish or verbalize ground rules with the employees on one-on-one?
Like about their job? Or,
No, about
or
the one-to-one. Is this confidential? What things get put into
You
your
can.
file? What things?
Absolutely. I think it goes back to the open-ended or structured. You can, if you're a new manager, maybe you want to have more structured. And then you can go over expectations in a one-on-one. Or you may have it open-ended and just kind of grow it organically going, I probably need to put some rules in there, or let me go over that. So I think you as a manager have to be pretty introspective to your employees to understand, do I need to create some sort of expectation? And everything that we write down, is it confidential? And again, if we're just talking about business and your family life, maybe, maybe not. And so I think you as a manager have to determine what you think that structure and that level of confidence that you have in your employees to be able to do that.
To this point about the CEO and sort of level jumping and people talking, like, you know, someone's 2 levels below you, or someone that you manage is kind of going 2 levels up or whatever, talk to them. I mean, I think throughout the organization, you should make your leaders aware. In situations like that, where that leader, the CEO, should say, hey, is it okay if I bring that up with your direct supervisor?
That's what I prefer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and every leader, if you're speaking to someone who's not on your team directly, that you direct report, or that's like a level or 2 below you, I think it's totally okay to say, hey, thank you for telling me that. Can I pass this off to them? Because that person might not necessarily be able to like really impact that, but they're the one that they felt confident to tell them about.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah, I mean,
And also the thing I'll say is, let's talk about how you can address this with your supervisor. How to make you stronger.
Hey, I facilitate a meeting between
Yeah.
the 2 of you.
Yeah, that too, yeah.
Yep, great point as well. And really the assumption for one-on-ones would be people that you directly manage, not necessarily opening it up unless that is your culture. But more specifically, again, the one-on-ones would be with your direct reports.
And that's what we tell our guys when we bring them in the door, say, you know, communication's the key. You know, you gotta make sure that you communicate with your team lead supervisor. You use the chain of command, and by all means, if there's something that you can't get worked out in a hard 1 month, you know, we'll try to help mediate that.
Absolutely. And I really like that you put that expectation in on the front end, that if there's something we can't help you with, let us know. But otherwise, we're going to try to eliminate any sort of issues at the lowest level possible.
That's what we tried.
Absolutely. So going along with this, your employees are going to have off days. Your top performers, your low in performance, your lower performance. The key in this is, do you know when your employees are having an off day? And you will know that because you built a relationship with them to know what their normal behavior is. And so this is a key component. And when you're trying to discern whether someone's engaged or not, if you have that erosion of engagement, think about the relationships that you have. Are you able to say, hey, I notice you're kind of off today. Is everything going okay? If you've never built that relationship with them, it's really hard to ask that because you're afraid you might offend them. You may open a can of worms that you didn't sign up for. And so think about that as well. So make sure that you're building a relationship with them so you can figure out when it deviates as well. All right, I want to talk to you about some tools and takeaways that you can bring back to your workplace. The first thing that I want to give you are some assessments. Now, you may have already heard of these. Some of them may require no cost or very low cost, but these are some areas that if you want to get to know your team more, or if you're thinking about reorganizing your team, not a layoff, because I know that's a nice word that we say. If you're reorganizing the job duties and the workloads, think about some ways that you can get to know them a little bit more. What we have is the colors test. Who in here has heard of the colors test? 2 people. All right, so 2 people, this is hard to read in a sense, but essentially there's different colors for your behavioral preferences. And so orange, for example, would be people that prefer to work in a results-driven, welcomes change, adventurous, appreciates risk-taking, confidence, and avoids detail. UT Hospital uses this, I'm pretty sure, the last time that I looked at this assessment. Of all the departments at UT Hospital, people in the emergency room would probably be orange. Fast pace, likes change, not a lot of detail. Hey, somebody come in a car accident, boom, 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 I can help you. People on your hospice team and work in the oncology, lots of people-centric, emotional, empathetic, seeks harmony in groups. Those are people that probably don't work in the ER. They probably work on the hospice floor, on oncology, in a very people-centric type one. So think about this. If you did a colors test with your employees, are people on the right seat, on the right bus within your organization? And it goes back to their behavioral attributes. Another thing you can look at is book club. We actually did this in my previous place of work. We did a book club. Now, this is not a lot of time investment. Everyone reads 1 chapter a week. You put a schedule out. And every Friday, or whatever cadence that you decide, we're going to go through the book together. And this week, Christine's going to lead chapter 7. She's going to tell us what she learned about it. And we've all read chapter 7, but she's going to take the lead on that. The next week, Betty's going to take chapter 8, and she's going to tell us about what she learned, and then how we can all communicate that as well. This book specifically, I've read the 5 languages of appreciation at the workplace. It's a pretty simple read. It's by Gary Chapman. He also wrote the 5 love languages, that it's more of like a spousal relationship. And so those 5 love languages are the same ones that are in this book, but it's applied to the workplace. So do people in your workplace like to get notes? Do they like words of affirmation? And so you can take those type things and also use that to commend your employees for things, especially if they like the words of affirmation or they like a high five. And so sometimes you don't know that about the employee until you read through a book together. We also have emergenetics. Who in here has heard of emergenetics? I love emergenetics. Our entire HR team has done an assessment with emergenetics. So it looks at the thinking preferences and the behavioral preferences as well. And it measures your flexibility, assertiveness, and your expressiveness. So what this means, it's just your preference in doing that. I may like to talk more than Betty. That doesn't mean that Betty doesn't like to talk or I can't shut up and be quiet. It's just a preference that I may have to do one or the other. So when we think about job duties and structures, are we structuring it in ways that actually go with people's strength, or are we trying to force them in a box that they really don't like to do? Now in business, I hired you to do the job. Whether you like it or not, you accepted the job. But are there areas that you control as a business leader that you can facilitate the workload just a little bit to capitalize on someone's strength and then minimize areas and places that they don't want to do as well. Then finally, we have the DISC assessment. Who in here's heard of the DISC assessment? Lots of people, a little bit more popular than the other ones. You can't read this, but it's very similar to the colors test. If you have the opportunity, you can do this with your team, and you can also look at roles and responsibilities that align with people's strengths as well. Yes?
So what do you do with the colors test? Is it like a Myers-Briggs, you just find out where people land so they can interact with them more effectively?
Yep. And when I was at the speech where they gave this about UT Hospital, they actually had people's name badge, like where it said their employee name, and the backdrop of that was the color that they identified with. And so your emergency room worker, someone that was in hospice, right? They're blue, or they're oncology, and they're going, look, I've got to make these decisions about something. I need to find a gold person, decision maker, because they've got to find people that have that strength. If someone with an emergency comes in, right, they're wearing orange, and they say, I really need someone to take care of this patient, they're having emotional distress, it's not me in orange, right? I'm going to send them to a person with blue. And so UT Hospital used this to quickly identify what those things are. Now, UT used it in that way. You can use it for various things. Our emergenetics profile is posted on outside of our door at work. So if you come into my office, you can see I'm pretty high in green, the structure, and I'm going to lack in some other areas as well. And so there's different things when you've gone through this assessment. I know how to interact with Betty a little bit more, that based on her strengths, not that I can interact with her that I don't know that, but it's a little bit easier to get to know someone if you also know what they're looking for and what their behavioral preferences are as well. Did you get your picture? You didn't, okay. Yes,
Are you going to send this out as a slide presentation? Is it possible?
I can.
That would be great, because I'd love to see some of this where I can read it.
Yeah, yeah.
Even with my camera, I don't know if it's going to work.
No problem. Yes, I can send that out. And I think we're doing a recording of it as well, and that will also be posted.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. What I want to talk to you about next is initiatives and how you can share this with your company. So FT Thomas is one of our sister companies. I work for an Alaskan Native-owned company. They're based out of Anchorage, Alaska. They're owned by the Inupiaq tribe. They're in a type of Eskimo tribe in Alaska. And so they oversee many operating companies, and FT Thomas is one of the operating companies, along with mine, with RSI that I work for. At an HR meeting several months ago, FT Thomas was the host, and they actually shared their initiatives with everybody on the HR team that came from various different operating companies. And I thought that was really neat, because what I do has absolutely nothing to do with their initiatives. But I thought that was neat that they communicated their goals to the organization wide. You are probably in meetings with senior leadership that we go over the initiatives, but do you actually tell your team what they are? I think a lot of times our team members can be functionally siloed and may not know, why am I working on the safety project? I don't really see the end part. But when you look at safety, if that's your number one initiative, they know how their project relates to the bottom line. They know how their project feeds in with other things within the organization. So think about, are there areas that you know as a manager that you can share? Maybe it's not business confidential or it's not financial records. Can you share your initiatives as a company with your team members to help better align their roles and responsibilities and get the bigger picture concept for what they do? Adds tremendously to employee engagement. I want to talk about employee resource groups. Who in here has heard of employee resource groups? One person. So they're kind of a newer trend. We talked about earlier the importance of, especially our younger generations, entering to the workforce. They're expecting to build community with people at their work. It's not functionally siloed like our family and our friends. They're expecting to build relationships among team members, including you as a supervisor. One company I want to talk about is Bridgestone Tires. I'm sure you've heard of Bridgestone Arena in Nashville. And so Bridgestone Tires obviously donated a lot of money to get their name on it, but they do have really good employee resource groups that employees can join when they join the organization. And you don't have to be a member of this demographic, you can also be an ally of it. Multiple groups for community. They have what they call the Be Bold, which is for people who are Black or African American. They have Be Next, which is for people who are emerging leaders. Be Proud for members of the LGBTQIA+ group. B Bravo, which is a group of veterans. B Buenos, I think that's how he said it. It's for Latino or Latina people. Be Win is a group of women. And Be Happy, which is a group of Asian or Pacific Islanders. And so there's multiple groups that if you're an employee, you probably can either fit in one of these or be an ally of one of these groups. These groups meet, not sure the frequency of it, but they go out and do community service together. They may go hiking together. They may go to something outside of work. And so it's based on their interests and demographics if they want to be a part of that as well. So I think Bridgestone Tires did a great job of building community at the earliest point possible. When you build those relationships, employees are engaged and they can stay longer. Of course, we looked at those statistics earlier. So think about ways in your workplace. How do your employees find connection and community at work? It doesn't have to be a program. We're not incentivizing programs. We're talking about how do you find connection? Do you make people find one thing in common their first week with another employee? Do you have them meet with other members of senior management? And so what is it that you're facilitating or that you can start to facilitate to be able to build community very quickly when they first join the organization? Last aspect I want to talk about as a business leader is fostering a lean team. We talked about the importance of agendas earlier, the preparation, the process, what the purpose is, and so think about the agendas. This also shows the level of respect within your organization. If you just meet to meet, but I really don't have a clear plan, someone who's a talker can dominate the conversation because they've not been told not to. The person that you really need to speak or gather their input, they don't know they're supposed to speak because you didn't communicate the expectation to them. So think about your agendas and making those work for you instead of the other way around. What about work instructions, desktop procedures, or SOPs, standard operating procedures? Review and update often. I don't know about you, but if I have to go back to a process that I've not done in a while, it's always nice to have written instructions. But if someone told me the written instructions were made in 1990 before I was born, they're probably very obsolete. And so think about, do you have processes that you do on a routine basis that you could probably update? Because if one team member does that and they leave, how is the rest of the organization going to be able to do it effectively? If you assign another team member to do it, but they don't have the resources, that can also be frustrating and not feel like they have a sense of control, leading to burnout as well. So think about where are your work instructions, are they updated often? And if not, think about how you can update that. Put a calendar reminder and say, we're going to update these instructions once a month. Maybe the screenshots have changed. Whatever it is, make it useful and make it a tool instead of a burden. Align the job duties with the interest. So if you've taken the assessments, you understand your teams, you're working on one-on-ones, think about how that work is distributed equitably across your team and do it based on interest if you can. Now again, you're not going to be able to change everybody's job to what they exactly want to do, but we're going to highlight things that they can work on that they are passionate about, leading to further employee engagement. Allow your team to have buffer days for catch-up. I don't know if you've been on a vacation in a while, but you come back, and I always hate that feeling, right? I'm trying to do emails, trying to go to meetings, trying to get deliverables. And so what can you do as a manager? If you know someone's going to be on vacation for a week, maybe that first Monday that they come back, you don't schedule any meetings, either with them or as a team. Allow them to go through their emails one-on-one. Allow them to have the space to do that. Because when they jump back in, they may not have been prepared. Maybe they still have 100 unread emails and they have no idea what you're talking about in the meeting because they've not caught up. And so think about this, buffer days. If you have capacity to do that and you're the manager, think about how you can give people the time back in their day so they can actually get started back and fully engaged in work when they're ready to start, even if it's Tuesday or Wednesday. Going along those lines, think about meetings that are less than 1 hour. I think a lot of times Outlook calendar defaults to 30-minute appointments or 1-hour appointments, or we've always done 1 hour, so we just put it as an hour, but we may not use the hour. What do? We end up talking just to fill the time. And so think about this. If you have less than 1 hour meetings, I'm talking about 50 to 55 minutes, so just a 5-minute or 10-minute difference. If you've ever had back-to-back meetings, it's very hard to just go to the bathroom or get a cup of coffee, and you're trying to also work within the margins that you have. I need to respond to this email. In the 3-hour time slot, I've been at 3 meetings, and I've gotten 1 email done, and then I feel behind because I now have this avalanche of emails that are there as well. So think about, can you make your meetings just a little bit shorter with more efficiency? And then your employees can go to the restroom, take a cup of coffee, go and talk to that manager so they have completion at the end of the day instead of feeling like they've just ran through meeting after meeting and then they're still stuck with the same amount of emails and volume of work to do at the end of the day. No meetings on Friday. If you can help it, maybe have a buffer day to not have that on Friday. So again, you may not be able to control it. Maybe your supervisor has meetings on Fridays, or it may be another day of the week that you want to do that. But think about creating space that your employees may not have that they currently manage, that you can give them that. Hey, we're not going to have meetings on Fridays. This allows you to finish up any projects from the week. I know we have new hires that always start on Monday. By Friday, I'm still trying to finish up all their checklists and stuff because I've got new hires coming on Monday. And so it's really nice to be able to have Friday as that intermittent day to finish up this current week's project and then to look ahead. When people don't feel like they can have that time to do it, it can lead to job burnout because they're doing that on the weekends. And then now it's in family time. And now they're starting Monday mornings, still doing Friday afternoons work. So think about how you can rearrange some of the work where you have no meetings or nothing that you're expecting of them within a certain amount of time. I read this really good book. It's called Work Simply by Carson Tate. And she goes through a lot of 21st century challenges. She talks about the email avalanche, and it's just overflowing. She talks about going to her kids' sporting events and managing her household. And so she talks about these various things that you have to put boundaries and perimeters on. And so this is a great way to look at work by the way she organizes it. She talks about priorities. She talks about working on things kind of in smaller increments to tackle overall. So great book if you're interested in being more effective with your time. I want to talk about roles and responsibility matrix. So a role and responsibility matrix is how work is divided on a team. On our HR team, I could tell you what the scope of our team does. We do recruiting, we help with information facilitation to payroll, we answer questions about benefits. So there's kind of this whole wide cast of a net that the HR team does. But more specifically, what is my role on that? Do I answer benefit questions or is somebody else? Does someone else do that? And so when we think about, yes, the team overall gets it done, but what specifically does your employee do different? What does Betty do different from Christine? And so when we think about that, we're clarifying roles. And so people don't have this, oh, I thought you were doing it. Oh, no, I thought you were doing it. And then nobody does it, right? Or too many people are trying to work on the same project and other things get neglected. And so this is how work is divided when you have a matrix. What it does, it assigns first point of contact. Someone has a benefit question, it always goes to Christine. If Christine is out, the backup person is Betty. When Christine comes back, she takes her workload. That's as simple as that. And so I think a lot of times we don't facilitate that as a manager. We just have other things to do and our employees are kind of left on their own to manage priorities, and sometimes it's not what we thought or we didn't tell them what we expected. And so think about how you can organize roles and responsibilities. This will also help you understand their workload. And what you thought, the 5 things that Christine was working on, is really not as much as what we thought. So we can actually give her more. But if you never lay out what she actually does, I may be actually assigning everything to Betty unconsciously. So think about that as you are looking at roles and responsibilities. This can be divided by strength and opportunities. If someone's really good with benefits, you can have them as their point of contact for benefits. But also, Jennifer may want to learn more about benefits, so I'm going to put her second point of contact for that. So think about this in terms of interest or opportunities. Maybe they want to grow and learn to do something, but we're not ready to put them as the frontline person for that. So think about that as you organize your workload. This also includes opportunities for growth. So if you have trainings that are industry trainings, I know I work in government contracting, so we work a lot with DBA, which is Davis-Bacon Act, SCA, which is Service Contract Out. I don't know nearly as much about it as I'd like to. So on the roles and responsibilities, I may be going to attend more trainings than my counterparts that would know more about the SCA as well. Equitable workloads, again, we've looked at this. When you lay out what everybody does, you can also see where the workload is mainly being assigned, and is that equitable across all team members? And then are your employees seeing completion at the end of the day? If we have 25 things assigned to them, do they ever get any of them done? Or do we want to focus on top 5 or 6 today, then the next person these 5 or 6, and then they overlap a little bit? But are your employees able to actually see closure on the things that they work on? Or we're just kind of casting, delegate, and we actually never come full cycle to make sure that that was complete. Yes.
I know you said that you're a big fan of the Microsoft Office products. I really love the tasks feature in there because that's what makes me feel like I've completed a lot for the day.
Yes.
And you can set all the reoccurring ones. And, I mean, I'm a list person in general, but I really like that feature, and I've tried to get folks on my team to use
Yeah.
it too.
Absolutely. Are you one of those she's still working on?
Yes, ma'am.
That will be on your opportunities on your matrix
See, I told
to
you, I
learn.
hear this every week, so, yeah.
Good deal. But great, great tool as well. Other tools that people have used that want to share? Great one as well. I also like calendar, obviously calendar appointments as well. You can also take emails and drop them into your calendar. You don't have to like retype them. You literally take the email and drop it into the calendar, and it will create a calendar invite for you with the title of the email and the subject. Everything in the body was the email. Then you just assign it to the day that you know it. So think about that as well. There's lots of tools and tricks. Again, my third love in life is Microsoft Office, so you can watch a YouTube video on the various different tools that they offer. All right, we're doing an activity. Hopefully you found your friend that you do not know yet, but you're going to become good friends here soon. We're going to take a couple minutes, and I'm going to just have a list of questions. You don't have to go through all of them. I just want you to have dialogue and engagement with another person that you do not know, because it's going to be your company base. So I'm going to give you some questions here to think through. You don't have to go through all of these, but you can just choose a couple. And then communicate that to that as well. So I'm going to have a couple people share at the end what they've learned either about their company or what they really like about their other company as well. So I'll give you probably 5 or 6 minutes. So find a buddy that you do not know and just kind of talk through some of these questions. Appreciate the interaction as well. Wanted to see what groups wanted to share what they learned either about their company or about the partner that they spoke with as well. Anybody want to share? Don't make eye contact with me or I'll call on you. Anybody want to? Sure.
So Tony at Boat here, they're doing, they had a safety goal that they were hoping to hit, and they hit it, so they're having a cookout to celebrate that accomplishment. So, yeah, that's awesome.
Everybody in the plant, so, and it'll wind up being both shifts, you know, it'd be pretty cool. You know, but we normally do that once a year anyway. We normally have a big cookout once a year. You know, it's a summer celebration kind of deal, you know, for the employees, you know. But this one's actually a little bit different because it came from the safety deal, so.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Our leadership team actually grills the steaks and stuff as an after service to our folks too.
And we all wind up serving, and it's pretty cool, man.
That's awesome. Love to hear that. Anybody else want to share what they learned? Anybody else? That's all you learned in the 5 minutes?
No, I kind of like, it was brought up that they do a thirsty Thursday kind of deal after work, you know, once a month. That's pretty
That's
cool.
when I go. They do it every week. I can't do it every
I wouldn't do it every month, though. I wouldn't be able to do it every week. That's pretty cool. There's no people that you don't work with every day.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
We talked about evaluations and the value and whether or not the feedback loop, how that works and whether or not that's a good thing for certain team members. We're trying different departments to do it different ways.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anyone else?
Betty takes her new team members out to lunch on their very first day. And
Okay.
actually it's the time to pay out of her own pocket, and I think that that's a really kind gesture. It tells people that she's invested in them and being a part of their organization.
Absolutely. That's great that you do that. Anybody else want to share? Awesome. Well, thank you again for participating in that. Wanted to facilitate. Sometimes we get siloed in our own companies that we've always done it this way. So it's always nice to solicit what other companies are doing as well and how you can incorporate their ideas into yours as well. So wanted to.
I'd have one more thing, just because you love Microsoft so much. One of the things that's been valuable for us is we use Microsoft Teams for internal communication. And we have a whole channel just called Kudos, where anyone in the company can shout out somebody else for something.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a good way to have them engage with each other
Absolutely.
on like celebrating the other person. Not just, we really kind of did because we didn't want leadership just constantly being like, hey, this person's doing a great job. Like all leadership really tries to stay out of it and not put anything in there very often. We want them to sort of celebrate each other.
Absolutely. And then when it's employee driven and not manager driven, it makes more impact.
Well, I'm sure there'll be something else I'll train on.
It's coming for you when you get back to the office, right?
UT Hospital uses that same,
Yeah.
the same thing about kudos, sending kudos out to their employees, and it's employee driven. It's not a manager giving a kudos to.
Absolutely.
But do you feel like you have the same employees, kudos and our buddy all the
It's
time?
pretty spread out. We've got a few people that, it's one of our company values to do that, to celebrate the success of others. So we have had a few employees where they say it, they'll just say it to their leaders, to their manager. I'm trying to think if Thomas was there, like, he would be like, come to you and be like, hey, so-and-so is doing a great job. And we're like, okay, well, go tell people other than me, like, that they're doing a good job. And so we've made it like a requirement every now, it's only been a couple of times, like, hey, you need to shout out 3 people in the next month when you see something. Now, obviously, don't try to like fake something, but you're seeing it regular enough that you should be doing it. So yeah, it's pretty spread out. Yeah.
Absolutely.
At Blunt Memorial, we do a very similar program called Excellence in Action, and it's where coworkers can observe, or if it comes even from the outside, from the community, where you can notice without doing some excellent work or something specific, and that goes through the chain to the manager that has the authority to render rewards. And we're talking like gift cards and money and things like that they can be appreciated with. But it's the employees that are recognizing each other.
Absolutely. Anybody else want to share? All right, just a couple more slides. So I wanted to bring this home for what we talked about today. So employees' engagement happens when the employees are connected. Talked about a lot of examples about connection. When the employees are informed, when they're valued, and when they know that their opinion matters. Those are the 4 takeaways I want you to take back with you today. What are you facilitating in your workplace to get these 4? And there's probably more, but those are the 4 that we focused on today. So recap from what we learned, we talked about what employee engagement is. We also talked about why we need employee engagement, the financial impacts to the bottom line for our top performers versus our not so top performers. We also talked about the causes of burnout and what that can look like and how you can also help control the things that you can control. We also talked about your role as a business leader and a frontline supervisor and creating an engaging environment through the focus areas that you can control. Things such as meetings, agendas, standards across your team, the speech, and your relationships with one-on-one with your team members. Then we also talked about some tools and takeaways. We also did a group activity as well, talked about the various assessments, and we went over some employee resources groups that we used with Bridgestone tires. That is all that I have for you today. Does anybody have any questions, comments, anything like that? Awesome. Well, thank you all again for coming out today and spending your Wednesday morning with us in April. I really appreciate your time.